Hey everyone, Jake from the future here. I'm recording this at the end of today's video, which is why everything that you see here is happening in a reverse chronological timeline like it's some kind of weird Christopher Nolan film. But it's because I forgot to give a big shout out to all of those that have been supporting me through my Ko-fi account. Any little tip that I get given through that account helps keep this channel alive. It helps keep me doing everything that I love doing, and it keeps me being able to make the kind of content that you guys are interested in and helping spread the knowledge of keeping these old cameras alive. In particular, I want to shout out 3 people who supported me. I wanted to shout out Jim Berg, who made a donation after I was able to help him fix a part on his SX-70 motor for his Model 1. I want to thank I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Sasa Bajelic? Bajelic. It's definitely got a J, but unless I knew what part of the world that was from, I'm not sure how to pronounce that J. And then lastly, a very big shout out to David Benjamini, who gave me a very generous donation. David has been following me ever since the days that I was streaming on Facebook Live and has learned a lot from my videos, so he just wanted to say thanks. And I wanted to say thanks back. As I said before, I really couldn't do this without the support of all of my loyal clients, all my loyal followers, and anyone that's ever given me a donation, whether it be in the form of monetary value or whether it be a camera for spare parts. I can't do this without you guys, and so I really wanted to say thanks. On that topic of tech repair, I do want to emphasize that I really don't mind answering SX-70 or Polaroid specific questions if you're stuck in the middle of a repair and you need a hand. However, I am very busy, and as this channel grows, I will likely continue to get busier. So if you're going to ask me a question, the only thing that I ask that you do is make it very, very specific. For example, Jim, he came to me, he sent me photos of an SX-70 motor already opened up. One of the carbon brushes had fallen off, and his question was basically, hey, this has happened. What's the best way to get a replacement or reattach that? Lovely question, super specific, very niche. I can already tell what he's been doing. I was able to answer that question in about 5 minutes. Happy to help. Where I'm not going to be able to help so much is if you come to me with a camera and you say, oh, hey, my shutter isn't working. How can I fix it? Because the answer is I have no idea. When I get asked a question like that, what it shows me is that you may not have the understanding of how complex these things are and are looking for a simple solution that possibly doesn't exist. Because with a question like that, like, oh, why doesn't my camera work? It's kind of like going into a mechanic and saying, my car doesn't start, how can I fix it? It's like, well, that's a very big that's a very big topic. Like, it could be so many different things that are wrong. It could be, you know, in the talk of the car, it could be you're out of gas, could be your battery's flat, could be your ignition cables are unplugged, it could be that you don't have an engine in your car. Like, like the list goes on and on and on. So like I said, I really don't mind being tech support, but if that's going to be the case and you are going to reach out and ask me a question, the only thing I ask is you just be very specific. Say, right, I have this exact problem, here's a photo of it, I need this replacement, like whatever it is, and I'll obviously do my best. But yeah, if it's too vague, if it's too open-ended, my only response can possibly be, look, I'm going to need to see it in person. I just simply can't help you. So anyway, on that note, I'm now going to restart the video and show you how we ended up here. Enjoy. Hello everyone, the Instant Camera Guy here. It is time. The third gold sonar is here. And I'm starting to understand why my client paid such a low price for it. Because, holy moly, what a piece of crap. So this thing is completely non-functional. I don't know if it's going to show up very well on camera, but the gold is utterly oxidized to the point where it feels rough. The whole thing smells like mildew, and I now no longer feel bad about turning this into a gold SLR680. This thing is just in terrible condition, and I think will be the perfect candidate for modifying and customizing. The leather smells bad and is mildewy and is missing a panel on the top, so I also think we're going to reskin this camera. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to spend the majority of this video just tearing this thing down. But what I want you to do is let me know in the comments below what color you think we should reskin this thing. So I'm just going to grab my box of skins from the back here, because I have a few candidates that I think would look really nice. So I'm just going to get some samples. The first we've got is tan, obviously a total classic, and would go really well with the gold. The Alpha SX-70s that were in gold had tan and gold. The Sonars always came out in black. Next option we do have is, of course, another black. We've got the Aki Asahi Crinkle Emboss, which is a really premium finish. I think that that would look really good. But the third option that I think is also a dark chocolate brown. This dark chocolate brown sort of was the color used on Model 2 cameras, the ivory and the black. And I think it pairs rarely. It would pair really well with the gold and give it a really luxurious finish. And it's sort of an in-between. Like if you went in between the black and the tan, you end up with this dark brown. So let me know what one you think I should do. Of course, we could go other crazy colors too, but I think that one of these three would be a great choice. Let me know what you think. But yeah, certainly I'll be removing the original leather because I've got to just polish up this gold finish so much. I don't really think it's going to be feasible to salvage the original leather that's on there. And of course, it's just in terrible shape and it smells bad. So given how rough condition the camera is in, I really think I've got no other choice but to strip it down. So I'm just going to put that leather just under my bench there. And yeah, I think what I might do is just demonstrate live on camera just how, like everything needs adjusting on this. It's in terrible shape. By the way, my client that sent me this is actually, he's a good friend of mine. He actually helped lay down turf in my backyard back when I lived in Melbourne. And he buys and sells a lot. Like he has a little online store just on Facebook Marketplace where he refurbishes a lot of digicams. So maybe if he provides me a link, I'll give him a shout out below. But he really does have a nasty habit of just sending me completely cursed cameras. And yeah, looking at this one too, I'm also not sure that the bellows are folding nicely. Oh no, it does. Anyway, I think the best thing for me to do is to completely strip this down. Polish all the panels, strip the whole thing for parts. The shutter is non-functional, the body is non-functional, and really try and rebuild it from the ground up. The only thing I'm really interested in salvaging here is these gold colored panels. So I'm gonna hit pause. Next time you see this, this camera is gonna be de-skinned, and we'll see how we can polish it, all right? Well, in case anyone thought I was up to sacrilege, I did salvage every single panel from the camera in case anyone ever wants to re-glue it and completely refurbish it back to original, but I wouldn't recommend that you do. Anyway, there's a lot of adhesive still left on this thing. This front door has a rivet that I'll need to replace, or two rivets actually that I'll need to replace now that I look at it. And yeah, I'm gonna have to be scrubbing this for a long time. Sonar cameras, Polaroid changed the adhesive design, and a Model 1 adhesive usually comes off pretty quickly. The Sonar leaves like this sticky, crusty mess. It's gonna be definitely a combination of shellite, a little bit of chisel work to get the crusty glue off. And yeah, this is going to take me quite a while, so I'm not going to subject you guys to that. You guys are going to come back and see a non-sticky camera, and then we're going to give it an attempt at polishing this thing. Well, that is a little bit cleaner, I think. The metal still utterly filthy, and I'm going to do my best to polish this thing as good as possible. I mean, realistically, it will not command a very premium price as it currently is. I'm going to get my camera around and just see if I can just show off how pitted some of the metal is here. A lot of these limited edition gold SX-70 sonars had kind of a matte finish on the chrome, similar to how the chrome finish on a sonar and an alpha was more of a matte finish rather than a shiny finish. So I'm going to do my best to polish this as good as possible on the request of the client. My hope is that this will not ruin the finish of the gold, but this camera is pretty toast to begin with. And as I said, really, the client paid very little money for this camera. So I don't feel so bad in terms of having to strip the whole thing down, but I will be as gentle as possible in terms of polishing it. Now, the polish I'm using is called Overhaul. You can get it at most car parts stores. I believe here in Australia, the hardware chain Bunnings sells it. It is very good stuff. I've been using it ever since I was a child, when I used to restore cars with my dad, and I just really like it. I think it's easy to use. You kind of just buff it on, and then using another clean cloth, just take away any of the oily residue that gets left behind, and it works like most other metal polishes do, like Brasso and that kind of stuff. It's doing a pretty reasonable job of the gold finish so far. Certainly not stripping it back or anything like that. The really pitted parts, I'm not sure if I should scrub all that hard. It's one of those things where if I take this too far, I only get one shot at this. And although I've certainly polished gold cameras in the past, I've never had to polish one as deeply as this. The rear panel will be interesting to see how that comes up. I'm actually using quite a lot of polish. Now, I'm keeping... Can you guys hear that? As opposed to... Can you hear the difference? And that's just how rough that rear panel is. I'm doing all of the polishing procedure before I take this camera apart. Reason being is that it's all intact, and if any bits of polish or dust wind up inside the camera, it's not going to matter so much because I'm going to go in and clean it all anyway. Now, the top of this rear panel is coming up really well, and the roughness is certainly going down, which is great. So I believe we're going to be able to get a marked improvement in terms of the finish here, which I'm pretty happy about. But yeah, this is, for a camera in this bad condition, I think this is all we can really expect. The viewfinder piece is also very, very bad. So that'll take a bit of effort. And I might just increase a bit of the pressure, seeing as how I'm not damaging any of the finish. I was a bit worried that I'd be buffing and all the gold would be coming off, but no, this is tolerating it pretty well. And I think a lot of the big issue with these gold cameras is that the gold on these finishes is more of like a brass. I don't believe it's like a true gold. Certainly it would be an alloy of some kind. I don't know the actual chemical makeup, but it's kind of dull, sort of like brass. And I think that's why it's so prone to pitting. This side is in much better condition than that side for some reason. But just from a smoothness factor, the camera now actually just feels like a normal SX-70 to hold. Like that rear panel, which literally felt like sandpaper, now feels nice to touch. And even if the finish isn't perfect, as I said, this is going to be, I guess, the world's only SX-70 camera that's been turned into a 680, especially with a manual control PCB, because I will be doing an SX-70R R upgrade to this as well. And it'll be the only one I think, in existence that actually uses an authentic original sonar body panel that was given to the factory employees. As I said in my last video where I covered a refurb of 2 gold cameras, there's very little information on these about how many were made, but the general consensus seems to be that it was under 1,000, and they were given only to like Polaroid employees, like long-term Polaroid employees, as a special gift in what must have been Polaroid's 30th anniversary. I think Polaroid started making cameras in like 1948, and so these would have been released around 1978 when the Sonar was at the height of its release. But yeah, information is very limited, and other people have made gold cameras since. So Retrospect did a run for Polaroid's, I think, 50th anniversary, or the 50th anniversary of the SX-70, I should say, not Polaroid's 50th anniversary. And Matt Widman, who was a former technician, he was an independent technician and a big inspiration of mine in America. He made a limited run, or at least some body panels where he had them actually gold plated with a shiny chrome finish by like an electroplater. And so a few, I don't think he ever finished those cameras, they were just kind of a proof of concept. And a few technicians ended up with those body panels and made their own cameras. But yeah, certainly finding any info about these original gold sonars is now quite difficult because of all the copies that have happened. Like if you Google gold SX-70, you get nothing but links to Retrospect's website and various other news and photography outlets that covered that release, which is a little bit annoying if you're trying to find historical accuracy. I certainly need to come and polish the front of this door as well, which actually does have some verdigris, like Statue of Liberty green oxidization on it. Yeah, the more I polish this, the nicer it's looking. So I guess it's going to have a bit of a patina. But yeah, basically my intent here, because I really do want my followers to get involved here, is to tell me what color should I skin this thing. You guys are going to have like, I guess, a week or so to let me know, because skinning it at the end is going to be the last thing that I do. But should I go with the chocolate brown? Should I go with black? What do you think I should do? All right, let's open this up because I do need to do the... I'll probably actually do the front housing of the shutter off the camera just because it's a little easier to get to. Everything in this autofocus assembly is like seized. It's quite a problem with some of these like limited edition cameras, is because they are such shelf queens, and a lot of people buy them purely because they look pretty on display. A lot of times the problems these cameras end up with is because of disuse, like everything just seizes up because they never get used. And so it's kind of a different set of problems as to what you normally find on SX-70s, where bits have worn away. Here it's the opposite. Everything oxidizes and just sits in place. I'm guessing, because this camera has absolutely no power, I'm guessing if I was to take out like the motor, it would literally have like 2 big blobs of oxidization where the carbon brushes attached to the rotor, and I've seen that before. There was actually a guy where I used to live in Melbourne, and they're still floating around out there. So for any of my followers that are still living over in Victoria, be aware of this. There was a guy on Facebook Marketplace about 2 or 3 years ago who, I don't know how, somehow acquired all of these new old stock SX-70 sonars. And these things had clearly sat in a warehouse forever. Like, they had never been opened, and they clearly sat somewhere very, very moist. And you can tell it's these particular set of cameras from the same run because they have like a texture mark on the side of the box, like someone in Sharpie has put like this little diagonal slash. So maybe there was some kind of, I don't know, clearance or deleted item or something like that. Some kind of bulk lot. And the other way you can tell it's from this particular batch of cameras is these cameras stink. Like, they smell like the most dank basement mildew you could ever imagine. Like, these cameras physically made me feel ill. And unfortunately, because he described these things as new in stock, like new old stock, I should say, a lot of people bought them expecting that they were going to have this minty unboxing experience, and they were all dead. Every single one of them corroded to the point of being completely seized. Now, I actually managed to revive quite a few of them. I think I ended up getting sent about 4 or 5 of them in the end. And the guy was charging like $300 a pop for these completely non-functional cameras. And I ended up messaging the guy being like, look, you know you're selling junk. Like, none of these cameras work. It's not that hard to film test this. Like, stop ripping people off. And the guy ended up getting very annoyed with me. But he did delete his listing shortly after that. And I put like a notice out, like in various film Facebook groups, just letting people know, like, hey, by the way, these are complete junk. Do not buy them. And yeah, they seem to disappear. But a few months later, someone else started selling the same bunch, like just under a different name, like the same listing but a different name. So yeah, there was certainly some shenanigans going on, I would say. So yeah, as always, caveat emptor, unless you're buying from a technician who can walk you through exactly what's been done to these things, there's really no guarantees with SX-70s. As I've said, even if you buy one that works, there's no doubt that it'll work for very long, especially if it hasn't been overhauled. So yeah, that metal finish is looking real nice on that front panel. So I'm super stoked with how that's coming out. This is actually going to look very presentable by the time it's done. One big issue that I actually have, someone's clearly put this on display for a very long time and the bellows no longer fold properly. I've talked about this before in previous videos, but if you leave a camera, if you leave an SX-70 on display for a long period of time, it's kind of like Viagra, right? If the erection lasts longer than 8 hours, you should consult a professional, right? Because these things, they're not designed to stay erect like this all the time. Two things happens. Number one, if you have film in that camera, the PCB of the camera is always like on, so to speak, like it's always turned on, and that will prematurely age your electronics. But secondly, UV light and that stretched state will end up shrinking the bellows and making them not fold properly. So this one's having a real trouble where sometimes it doesn't want to stay shut. So unfortunately on Sonar cameras, they riveted the bellows in place, which does make them very annoying to replace. Probably the best thing that I can do is actually my friend Dong, my client here, he sent me a few Model 1 cameras, which are also in very sad condition. And the difference between the bellows on a Model 1 and a Sonar, they're exactly the same shape. They fit perfectly. But the difference is on a Model 1, they were still screwed together. So it's held in place at the top with 4 screws. And that makes them completely and utterly replaceable. Like, you can easily swap them out. And I much prefer to do that. Like, so for example, if I have a camera that needs a new set of bellows, because no one manufactures bellows these days, the only place that I can get a replacement set of bellows is if I get a separate camera, like a spare camera. And my priority is always just to find a cheap Model 1 or maybe a Model 2, although you can get unlucky and have Model 2s that are riveted together. But certainly a Model 1, most of the time, like an early one, will have bellows that are screwed in place. And it's just much easier. It's much easier, and it means that if I ever do have to repair the camera again at some stage in the future, I don't have to go drilling out rivets. I have a bit of a saying that, you know, you should never glue what you can screw. And that also applies to single-use fasteners as well. Things like rivets and stuff, they're very frustrating for technicians because they're hard to replace. You need to destroy them, basically, to get them out. So I try where I can. If I've really got to replace a set of bellows on like an Alpha or a 680 or a Sonar, I'll try and get the client to source me like a busted up, beat up old Model 1, because it just makes things a lot easier. Now, one of the things I have to do, 2 of the door rivets have actually come undone on either side here, and I will actually have to replace that. These use 1/16 brass rivets to hold this little metal plate onto the door. Now this metal plate, this is where the film ejects. So if you have a shot of film, it goes sort of through the rollers and then it comes out under the door flap here. And it's this metal plate that actually holds that bit of film in. Now Polaroid used 1/16 brass rivets, which, I mean, they're just not super strong. I'm not sure if they changed like the manufacturer of rivets that they were using sometime around the Model 2, because certainly you will find busted rivets, mainly from my experience anyway. I mean, this is obviously not a golden rule, but I tend to find that you will find the most busted rivets on cameras produced after the Model 2, so sort of after 1975. It seems to me, at least, that Polaroid started cheapening out on that rivet material. Whereas on Model 1 cameras, the very first generation, it's very rare to find busted rivets from my experience. To replace them, you need to get specialty brass rivets made up, and then either use a punch or a special set of pliers in order to replace them. I find that procedure annoying, because it relies on proprietary bits. So I don't actually use that method. When I replace rivets on a door, I actually use pop rivets from like the local hardware store. Now, they don't make pop rivets as small as 1/16 that I've actually been able to find, which is a little bit annoying, but they do make some in a 3/16, which is just slightly larger. So my preferred method of replacing the rivets is actually to drill out the holes a little bit larger, cut up a pop rivet, so actually just cut the shaft down to the right size, and pop them in, and then using a Dremel, just flatten the head of them until it matches the door. Now this metal plate, you don't have to worry about it because you'll never see this part, so any small marks that I may make on the door with a Dremel aren't going to matter. But there's 2 advantages to that. The first being, my rivets that I use as a replacement are bigger. So bigger means fatter shaft, means shouldn't break as easy in the future. The second advantage is, as I said before, they're not like a weird proprietary thing that I'm going to have to go to some specialty rivet manufacturer to get made up. I don't need a special tool in which to put them into the camera. And by doing that, it basically means that should it ever break again, which I mean, it really shouldn't. I'm putting in a rivet that's thicker than the original. But should it ever break again, I can just go to the hardware store and get a replacement. It's just my way of doing things. Purists may say that, you know, you'd want to go out and track down an original brass rivet, and certainly there are manufacturers, I've looked into it. They're just more expensive. And the thing is, I'm ultimately replacing that rivet with another identical one that broke in the first place. So how reliable is that really going to be? So maybe what I'll do, I'll just remove the last remains of those 2 little rivets. Maybe what I'll do, because the middle rivets here are fine, what I might do is just come grab my things, gather all my tools, just drill out those holes and cut down some rivets to size and replace them. And I'll show you guys my technique. So let's hit pause there. I'll come back with everything that I need, and I'll show you how I do it. Oh, it's worth noting, by the way, that I also have done the original rivet technique as well. I do specifically own a set of punches. I just find this way to be way easier, cheaper, and stronger, which to me is a win-win-win. All right, we are back, and I have some extra tools. First of all, drill with a drill bit that is the exact same size as the rivet that I'm going to be using. I, of course, have my handy pop rivet gun. But one of the main things I need to do, the shaft on these rivets are just simply way too long. As I said, the SX-70 uses rivets that are a really specific size. One of the reasons that I prefer to use screws instead of rivets where I can is that you can always cut down a screw to size, you can cut down a bolt, you can carve new threads, heck, you can even make your own bolts if you have some brass rod and a tap and die set. But rivets really have to be made to a specific specification, unless you know how to cut them down. So, what I'm going to do, using my set of pliers here, I'm actually going to just remove the rivet from the shaft of the pop rod. And what I'm going to then do, I'm just going to mount that rivet backwards so that the shaft goes through the rivet. And what I'm going to do is basically just cut half of it off, because it only needs to be very, very small and stubby. So there we go. And now I have a rivet that is half the size. So what I can do is now just mount that back onto the shaft, which sometimes takes a bit of finesse. There we go. And this can go now into the pop rivet gun just to push the rivet back onto the pop ball. And now we have a homemade correct size rivet. I'm going to do the same thing again, then we're going to drill out the holes and I'm going to put those rivets in place. Now the reason that I'm putting the rivet back onto the shaft is you need something to be in the middle of the tubing so that the tubing doesn't collapse when you use the side cutters. I used to use a Dremel for doing this, but then I realized that the side cutters actually did a much neater job without having to turn power tools on. There we go. And again, same thing, one brand new stubby rivet, which I'll now just put back onto its pop shaft. Sometimes it takes, yeah, a little bit of finagling, but that's gone on nicely. All right, so 2 stumpy rivets to replace the ones in the door. And since this panel's already held in place with 2 rivets, I'm literally just gonna drill. That's 1. And that's 2. There we go. So just peeling the layer off a little bit, just making sure that there are no filings in there whatsoever and that it's going to sit nice and flush. Great. And so the new rivet is going to go in the little hole like so. Yep, that is the perfect size. And basically all I need to do now is, you guys can see where the pop rivet's mounting. And this is just so much easier to do. The new rivets that I have are basically the same size, but they've got a slightly domed top to them because they are 3/16 instead of the 1/16. So the top sticks up a little bit more. That's why I've got the Dremel just to go over it and just carve the head of the rivet back down. Now what that does is it actually makes that bottom panel completely flat. And as I said, you don't really need to worry about slipping, although obviously that's not advised. But if you do mark up this panel, don't worry about it, the leather is going to cover it. All right, so on like so. There we go. Try not to drop things. This is obviously a little harder if you're trying to show the camera. Normally I would do this in my lap, supporting this piece in between my legs. But sometimes I just got to make the sacrifices for the content. Yep, that's all going on nicely. I'll just check this side, make sure there's no dust. Perfect. There we go. Now, truthfully, those rivets are really flat. You could actually just put the leather straight over that. It literally sticks up by maybe 1/2 mil. So, of course, you could go and drill, you could just put the leather straight up. It's not even 1/2 mil, it's like a fraction of a millimeter. What I'm going to then do is just Dremel the top of those so it's completely flat. So I'll be right back. I've just got to plug everything in. All right, now I took the liberty of sweeping off a bunch of the dust from the drilling away from my workstation. The Dremel is plugged in. And what I can now do is just focus on filing the tops of those rivets. Safety first. Now I've taped up just using a bit of electrical tape here, any of the gold that surrounds where those rivets are. And really just a very slow speed is all you need. Like really just the first setting is going to be fine. And all we want to do is get that surface to be completely flat. That's it. There we go. And we'll just do the other side. Great. And there we have it. One fully repaired SX-70 Sonar in gold door. Now, like I said, there's two ways that I could have gone about doing this. You can either go and contact a brass rivet manufacturer and get them to make perfect reproduction 1/16 brass rivets and buy in bulk a big order. But the reason that I've chosen to do it this way is not because I don't know how to contact a brass rivet manufacturer, but because I'm choosing to do it this way. Polaroid already used way too many weird proprietary parts when they built these cameras. Finding replacements that are off the shelf will ensure better longevity of these cameras going into the future. And if the rivets are thicker and less likely to break again, then I see that as a bonus. But yeah, usually I can bang this out a little bit quicker than this. It is obviously harder with all the repairs that I'm doing, trying to have to explain everything that I'm doing and make sure that it's all captured on camera as good as possible. It adds time, etc. But this is a really nice, quick and easy method of replacing those door rivets without having to resort to bizarre special orders and tracking down tools. A friend of mine who is a technician in America, like basically dedicated like his entire spare time to finding the correct pliers to mushroom the ends of the rivets. When I was like, yeah, I have a Dremel and a pop rivet gun, I'm just going to use that. So there are obviously pros and cons. This is the way that I do it for all the reasons that I mentioned before, and it works really, really well. The rivets that I've just Dremeled, by the way, are actually flatter than the originals. So in terms of leather, if you've got particularly thin leather that you're going to be using and you're worried about indents showing up, which can happen, well, that's one less thing you're going to have to worry about. Anyway, that basically does it. While the rollers are off, I'm obviously going to clean things. And then I'm just going to resume, I think, taking apart the rest of the camera. Because really, all that I'm doing is stripping it down. The whole internal mechanism is going to need to be overhauled here so that it can accept the 680 body. I might, depending on the condition of the focusing screen, which I can't even really see at the moment since the viewfinder is just so hazy, I don't really know how salvageable it's going to be, so I may end up swapping a few parts. I'm not really sure yet. I really won't know until I dive in there. Certainly I'll be swapping the motor. I actually have a few spare motors that I can chuck in there, including an alpha spec motor that was actually made by Canon, believe it or not. I took it out of a Polaroid Pronto, and I almost couldn't believe my eyes when I saw that it said Canon on it. It had a big Canon logo. So clearly Canon used the same type of motors as the SX-70 in some kind of their product, maybe a motor drive for one of their cameras. Clearly they were quite a popular motor design, that basic shape. Right, I will put these rollers back together, like so. The rollers in an SX-70 are held in with 2 screws. You guys would have seen me take them off before, I just didn't mention it. These are just square head screws. They have a particular thread, which is fairly coarse. Put that off to the side, there we go. Alright, now will I... Yeah, I'm going to need penetrating oil on this, of course I am. They are ridiculously stubborn, these screws. Moisture and corrosion hasn't been particularly kind to this poor SX-70. There we go, is that one coming out? Oh dear. Wow, these screws are completely stuck. Like they're just absolutely rounding. Rounding the head of my high tensile square bit driver. There we go, that's one. Jeez Louise. All right, I did flick the soldering iron on, so let's try that old trick. There's no adhesive left on the top of these screws anymore. This must just literally be corrosion. Now, often in the day, when you would see old repair jobs from previous repairers, you'd often see like Dremel marks where old technicians have had to cut the heads of the screws off in order to get them out. They basically carved the square head into a flat head. So it is a technique that you sometimes have to do. Usually penetrating oil and a bit of heat will take care of things. But this camera is particularly crusty. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if I had to resort to extreme measures. Yeah, does nothing. Well, far out. I'll be damned. Yeah, absolutely just rounding out. That's crazy. Yeah, I haven't seen one this bad in a long time. Yeah, my bit is still the correct shape. Well, there you go. 3 of 3, completely jammed. There's no way I can get these out. And these bits that I'm using were professionally made, high tensile magnetic bits. They were made by an enthusiast about 2 or 3 years ago now, and I bought myself 2 sets. Both of mine do not work at all. I've got one other set that I could try. This is the one that comes from Retrospect when you buy one of their Polar Pack battery backs. And yeah, it does nothing. Oh, it got this one out. All right, so that's one less screw I have to Dremel. Let's try this one again. Yeah, this is just no way. Oh, hang on. All right, well, these two will have to be cut out. There you go. Finally on this channel, I've been defeated. The last video I talked about how it's often not really necessary to remove the screws with the Dremel, but in this case, I'm afraid it is. And I'm actually very glad that I still have the Dremel out from the job that I was doing before. Look, this happens sometimes. I would also hazard a guess and say that these rivets on the LD wheel here, I would say there's a very high likelihood that if you try and remove those because of the oxidation, that the head would come straight off. Because I've seen this kind of thing before, and it just happens. Anyway, we'll cut them out then. Oh, if you're a fan of Polaroid, look away, I swear. It always hurts me to do this. Wow, they're still not coming out. There we go. Jeez Louise, these are really corroded and really in there. Yeah, don't worry too much if I'm marking the bottom panel. Remember, the leather does sit here. And as I said, oftentimes when you take away the leather from original Polaroid cameras, you'll often see these marks there from the factory. Because a lot of SX-70s, when people would return them, the body panels would end up being recycled. So oftentimes you'll open like a new old stock, never been touched, no repair markings on it, Polaroid camera with perfectly original leather. And when you undo it as a technician, you go, hang on, someone's already been in here like 40 years ago. All right. Come out now. Yeah, there we go. Holy moly. Well, it has been a long time since I've had to Dremel out 2 screws. I do have to do the odd one every now and again, but that was quite the challenge. And this is why I record this kind of content, so you can see me struggle. Actually, do you know what? I'm very glad I'm struggling sometimes, because I think one of the biggest pitfalls of this channel is when I do jobs that are, you know, very smooth sailing, I think I often give the impression that refurbishing these is easier than it looks, or easier than it actually is, I should say. Because I've actually had, since I started this channel, I've only been on YouTube like a month at the time of me recording this video. I've had several people contacting me saying, hey, I watched your videos and I've like stuffed everything up. So I always try and leave a little disclaimer saying like, please don't try this at home if you're not technically proficient. But yeah, I think sometimes because I've mainly shown pretty straightforward stuff so far, that I think I can make this look a little easier than it actually is. Yesterday, for example, I was working on a client's Model 1 Fairchild, and that camera was just struggle town. Like, everything about it was hard. It had a crimped lens cell. When I removed that, the popsicle lens came off, so I had to drill a hole in the popsicle lens to remount it, and then I had to use a screw and tap a thread, and then I put in the new screw, and because it was old, the head stripped straight off, so then I had to take the screw out. Oh, it was such a production. Like, it was like an hour and a half of literally just trying to fix one thing and remove fungus from a lens. And this is why you pay me money, guys, so that I have these struggles for you and not you. But yeah, Dong, if you are watching, you're a great client of mine, but you really suck, you know. Why do you send me such cursed cameras? Every time I get something from you, it's a palaver. It's an absolute ordeal. I love you, man, but come on. Enough is enough. You send me the 680 with the broken opto sensor. Last year, he sent me like 11 SX-70s, of which I could only save 7. The rest were just that bad. Like, I was literally combining cameras. Now, I get the feeling these screws are going to be hard to take out, too. Oh no, pretty easy. Sometimes they can be tricky when they're sticking into the lens board. I don't know what I'm going to do with this shutter. It's like the lens is a complete write-off. I would have to completely dismantle the whole thing and basically build it up again from scratch. I'll probably do that off camera in another video because it's so far gone. Everything feels seized. But really, the focus of this camera is not the shutter assembly. Ugh. Oh, so dirty in here, so gross. Yeah, the focus of this camera is not its shutter, really. We're mainly after the body. So, I think the next thing that I'll do, I'll just remove the metal tongue from inside the door. Oh, I'm still wearing my safety glasses. Here I am thinking, why does the world look slightly blurrier than it normally would? There we go, one metal tongue gone. So now whatever person ends up owning this in the future, if they want to convert it to I-type film, they can. Just going to file down those metal stakes. Now, any kind of work that you're doing involving filing, polishing, really anything that's going to make a mess and form fine particulate matter, you want to try and do that at the start of the restoration, before you take before you've taken everything apart and put it back together again. The reason being is that if you make the mess now, as I'm getting inside the camera, it's going to be much easier for me to clean. There we go, that's one. And that's two. They came out surprisingly easy. Just gonna get myself a little lid here to put all these screws in, since I'm starting to acquire quite the collection. I didn't intend on this video to go for this long. I kind of just wanted to show off the polishing process, but this might as well just turn into a full tear down, hey? Just keep that long form content going. There we go. Actually, on that subject, in terms of the type of content, I've had a few requests to do more like tip-based videos. Not, I guess, like shorts, but you know, just smaller tips. And I've started to do them. Like I did one on cleaning rollers the other day. But what you'll probably never find me doing is like very short videos, like YouTube shorts and that kind of stuff, which are under like 1:30 long. And there's a very good reason for that. And that's that personally, I don't feel that you get enough information from those short videos to truly understand a topic. And Polaroid cameras are... There's something very interesting about Polaroid that just attracts so much misunderstanding of how these things work, and so much misunderstanding in terms of like the functionality, how the film works, different tips and that kind of stuff. It's really, really bizarre. I'm a member of a lot of other film forums as well, and this doesn't really seem to happen with like traditional cameras as much. Like so many times on the Polaroid group, someone will ask a question and like get several answers, and you can guarantee like half of those answers are just straight up wrong, or even worse, like kind of half true. So people sort of have an understanding, but not the true understanding of how it works. Like for example, doing a video on like how SX-70s work in like manual mode, like saying that it can shoot at like 1/2000th of a second. Well, that's not really true. That's kind of like a metering mode. So it's like there ends up being this like sort of half understanding of what's going on, and that's part of why I wanted to make this channel, because really what I'm trying to do here is, like, I've spent the better part of my spare time over the last 13 years dedicating my life on how to fix these things, generally learning these skills from scratch, because when I started there was really no information out there like this. And I want to give back to the community and really spread this knowledge, because I did so many things over the years completely wrong that I didn't need to, because no one was there to tell me otherwise or improve me or say, hey, your understanding of that actually isn't correct. So I want to be that guy that can now tell people the right way of understanding something and just help everyone's education on Polaroid cameras. So that's sort of my goal for this channel, I guess. As well as, yeah, just showing off all my repair techniques, but I want to try and educate people as much as possible. And one of the videos I plan on doing in the future is going to be about the light dark wheel, because Polaroid's recommendation, they're like, oh, by the way, you just need to kind of set it to the dark, and, you know, because our film is, you know, slightly different ISO. That's That's just straight up wrong. It's not incorrect. Most original SX-70 film, as far as I can tell, was around 150 ISO. And the difference between 150 and 160 ISO is 6%, which is not even enough to register on a handheld light meter. Like, that's how similar those values are. So you're telling me that the reason that we have to, engage the little LD wheel on our cameras is because your film is off? No. The reason that you have to do that is because most people are shooting on SX-70s that are either unrefurbished, half refurbished, or not refurbished properly, and they're led to believe they're like, yeah, just find whatever setting works. No, that is wrong. The setting you should be using is the middle, unless you are doing some kind of exposure compensation. If you need to adjust your LD wheel, whether it be during a flash exposure or an ambient light exposure, your camera needs a surface. Simple as that. No ifs, no ands, no ors, no buts. That is just how it is. And so little things like that, like it irks me that there's so much misinformation out there. So yeah, that's sort of what my intent is with this channel, is to try and educate people better. And hopefully people can then spread my information along and continue that train of teaching. Anyway, that was a little digression. While I've been doing that, I'm obviously just cleaning this viewfinder assembly because it was super duper grubby and mega dirty inside because, well, this entire camera is mega grubby and super dirty inside and is just super disgusting. And I haven't even gotten to the inside part yet. But basically what I want to do today, I want to get to the stage where I can take the entire bellows off the camera. I want to drill the bellows off the lens board. Hopefully the mirror, I'm actually praying that the mirror inside here is loose so that I can easily remove it. Because I do want to find a set of Model 1 bellows, and my client, Dong, he's actually given me a Model 1 camera that he picked up very cheap in Vietnam, which is where his family's from. And so I think I'm going to use Model 1 bellows on this camera so that it's just easier to take apart in the future. All right, what am I doing here? I'm just going to stop ad-libbing for a second and concentrate. Because I've tried to do so many of these viewfinder assemblies live on camera. And they're a simple enough construction, but they can be surprisingly tedious and fiddly to work with. And I do just need to concentrate extra hard on putting them back together. It's one of those things where I'm like, hey, this is difficult even for me. All right, that bit's been cleaned. Great. Where did I put those pins? All I gotta really do is get that long one in. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, there was an ad for something in Australia that used that as a line. They're like getting into a car and they're trying to start the car. They're like supporting a rugby team. Maybe it was for like roadside assistance or something like that. And they're like, here we go, here we go, here we go. And the enthusiasm gets less and less the more that the car fails to start. I don't know why that memory just came into my head. Come on, get in there. These things are so fiddly. Doesn't help when the posts are so corroded. Nearly done. Just got to realign that one. There we go. I can feel my pocket vibrating. I must be getting some kind of a call or something. So that is great timing. I think now that this is reassembled, I'm going to cut that there and come back to it after I check what's going on my phone. And we're back. That was, funnily enough, a client of mine from Sydney who wants me to refurbish an SX-70 Sonar. So how's that for topical? I'm just going to continue stripping the screws from this camera, like so, and punch out the rear hinge pins. This camera has all of its hinge pins, unlike one of the other gold sonars I refurbished just the other day. And the last thing I need to do is find my special little screwdriver. Where have I put it? Oh, here it is. And just take out the bellows clips. So we've got on one side, there we go, and the other side. I can see what I'm doing. There we go. Now that should flip forwards. Yeah, bit of fungus, but it's not too bad. Let's see if the mirror is loose. And of course it's not. So I will need to cut that mirror out, but here you can see exactly what's happening with that bellows. It does not fold nicely on one side. This side with the erection arm folds fine. This side wants to cave in. And that's problematic for trying to close the camera adequately. So I'm going to remove this mirror. The best way I find to do this is to just slide a scalpel in and as best as possible, cut the two blobs at the rear. Yep, there we go. I think that's free. Yep, that's completely free now. And what I want to do is just remove this lug. And now we should just be able to swing the mirror over. Now, this mirror wasn't loose, but I have to remove it so that I can get rid of these defective bellows. Now, surprisingly enough, this is actually the clear silicon. This is the defective silicon that Polaroid used. I was wondering why it was a little easy to cut off with a scalpel. This mirror is in good condition, so I will save it. We'll put it off to the side. And the last thing that I'm going to do is these bellows assemblies on a sonar like this are held in place with rivets, and I should still have my drill bit. So what I'm going to do, and I have to do this at the edge of the desk, so I am sorry my camera capture won't necessarily capture this, but I'm basically going to hold the body of the camera over the desk so I can use the edge of the table under the lens board. I'm going to hold the bellows like so, and that gives me the best access to just drill out the two rear of these rivets, and then I can pop the whole top housing off, and then I can attack the rest of those rivet panels. So let's see. Yeah, this is about as much as I'm going to capture, so sorry guys. You'll have to take my word for it. One. And they should pop out with relative ease now. There we go, that's one. think that one might need a little bit more. There we go. And that is how we liberate this puffy bellows assembly from a chassis which is actually in not bad condition, all things considered, given just how utterly filthy it is inside. So, I think I'm going to end the video there, because I need to go and source myself an SX-70 Model 1. I'm going to have to drill out and replace these bellows. Now that the bellows are off, can you see how it's folding? Can you guys see that? I'll try and zoom in on this as best as I can. Can you focus here, camera? So that's erect, and as the bellows come down, one side, actually let me get a white piece of card, because that should make it, I think, a little easier to see. Let me just see if I can put my hands on something. Here we go. Let's see if I can get this white piece of card inside here. Just gotta trim it down. I'm trying to make this easier for the camera to see. So if I put this white piece of card in here and have the bellows erect, right, like so, and then I collapse them down, see how that's folding asymmetrically? So this side is folding fine. This side, what's happened is the inside has come undone like so. And it basically, where the crease is supposed to be, the rubber has become malformed, and it should be folding, yeah, something a little more like that. But that just simply won't happen because of this big malformation in the rubber. So what's going to end up happening each time is, yeah, it's going to fold and do this weird shape. And we can actually see on the Fresnel screen where that shape has actually pressed into the side there. So yeah, this body needs a complete do-over. It's like filled with dirt and soil in here. It's so gross. I never understand how soil gets like inside the body of the camera. But I guess it just is what it is. The chassis though has no rust, and once it's clean will actually be completely fine. The Fresnel screen I think will even scrub up nicely and will look really good with a rule of thirds. But yeah, the bellows we need to remove. But that is pretty much where I'm going to leave the video until I have also disassembled a Model 1 to go along with it. I'll try and edit this and get it done today. As always, you've been a wonderful audience. I hope you enjoyed learning a few different techniques here, and I hope, as always, you like my nice light-hearted commentary that goes along with these videos. As always, if you want to send a camera in my way, please feel free to do so. Just get in touch. And yeah, as always, you're a wonderful audience.